Your daylily clump looks brown, collapsed, and lifeless. But here's the truth. That plant is almost never dead. Daylilies are some of the toughest perennials you'll ever grow, but a few small, easy-to-miss decisions can quietly hold them back or push them toward real trouble. Fix those, and you can see fresh fans pushing up, taller stalks and heavier blooms replace that sad clump. You're getting 5 secrets today. Secret number 3 sounds almost too cheap and simple to matter, and most people do it backward. But it won't save a plant that's buried too deep or starving for light. Secret number 5. Check where your daylily's crown actually sits, because that one decision can be the difference between a clump that disappears and one that fills back in. The crown is that firm, pale core where the roots and the leaves meet, and it's the part that carries the plant through drought, freezing winters, and total neglect. A lot of gardeners assume deeper is safer, so they set new divisions low in the hole, or they let years of mulch and soil quietly build up around an older clump without ever noticing. That instinct makes sense. Deeper feels protected, tucked in, out of danger. But daylilies don't work that way. Think of the crown like a doorway the plant breathes through. Bury it too deep, and that doorway gets sealed shut. So instead of storing energy for next season, it sits in damp soil and starts rotting from the inside out. That's often the real reason a clump goes from thriving to stalled, with no new fans pushing up and the base feeling soft instead of firm when you press it. The fix is simple. Brush back the soil at the base of the plant and look. The crown should sit about 1 inch below the surface, no deeper. If you're planting new divisions, set them at that depth from the start. And if you bought a potted daylily from a nursery, check that it wasn't already sitting too low in its own pot before you transplant it. If an established clump has been slowly buried by years of mulch, soil washing downhill, or just settling over time, gently rake that excess away until the crown is visible again. In heavy clay or a spot that stays soggy after rain, don't fight the ground, raise it instead. A quick way to check your drainage is to dig a hole about 1 foot deep, fill it with water, and see how long it takes to disappear. If it's still sitting there after several hours, that soil needs help. And a slightly mounded bed or raised border gives the crown the drainage it actually needs to avoid rot. Go too shallow instead, and you risk the opposite problem, drying out fast or heaving out of the ground during a hard freeze. So this isn't about planting high just to feel safe either. Get the depth right, and you'll usually see new fans emerging at the base within the same growing season, which is the clearest sign that crown is finally breathing again. But depth alone won't save a daylily that's sitting in the dark. Secret number 4. Your daylily can look completely healthy and still be starving for something specific. If your clump has plenty of leaves, but barely any flowers, or the stalks lean hard to one side reaching for brighter ground, that's not a sick plant, that's a light-starved one. Most gardeners see healthy green growth and assume everything is fine. It's easy to think, it's growing, so it must be happy. But growing leaves and producing flowers cost the plant 2 very different things. Daylilies need at least 6 hours of direct sun, real direct sun, not filtered light through branches, to put serious energy into buds instead of just foliage. Less than that, and the plant keeps making leaves because leaves are cheap to produce, while flowers, which take far more resources, get left behind almost every time. Walk your garden at a few different points in the day, morning, midday, and late afternoon, and actually track how much direct sun that spot gets. Do this over a week if you can, because shade patterns shift as nearby trees leaf out through spring, and a bed that looked sunny in March can be half shaded by June. If it's falling short, either move the clump during dormancy, never mid-bloom, or thin back whatever's shading it, an overgrown shrub, a low branch, a fence line creeping taller each year. If moving an established clump isn't realistic right now, growing a division in a container, you can shift into full sun is a reasonable middle step while you plan something more permanent. One exception worth knowing, darker reds and purples can handle a bit more shade and often prefer some afternoon protection in hot climates, since intense sun can bleach or fade their color, while pale yellows and pastels want all the direct sun you can give them. Get the light right, and the difference shows up fast. Stalks stand taller and straighter instead of leaning toward the nearest gap in the canopy, and you'll usually see more buds packed onto each one, sometimes doubling what a shaded stalk was producing. Now here's the one most people get completely backward. Secret number 3. Stop feeding your daylily so much nitrogen, because that generous feeding routine might be exactly why the blooms are disappointing. Picture a huge, lush, deep green clump that looks incredibly healthy, but barely flowers at all. Most people see that and reach for more fertilizer, thinking a stronger feed will push out more blooms. It's a completely reasonable assumption. Feeding usually means more growth, and more growth should mean more flowers, right? Here's the catch. Nitrogen tells the plant to build leaves, not flowers. Pour on a high nitrogen feed and you get exactly what you asked for, oversized foliage, while the plant redirects the energy that should have gone into forming buds. That lush look is actually a warning sign, not a reward. What daylilies actually want is restraint and a little balance. If you've never tested your soil, a simple home test kit can tell you whether you even need to feed at all before you add anything. A light, balanced feed or a lower nitrogen formula built more around phosphorus and potassium, applied once in early spring as new growth starts and again after the first flush of blooms finishes, is usually plenty. If your soil is already reasonably healthy, you can often skip fertilizer completely and just top dress with a bit of compost, and the plant will do just fine on its own. If you do use a commercial feed, water it in well and follow the label rate exactly. Never double it to chase faster results, because pushing concentration that high can burn the very roots you're trying to help. And keep lawn fertilizer, which is loaded with nitrogen, from draining or drifting into the bed after you feed the grass. There's a bonus here too. A plant that isn't forced into oversized soft growth typically handles winter better, since that lush tissue is more vulnerable to cold damage than growth that developed at a normal pace. Within a season of easing off, you'll often notice shorter, sturdier flower stalks holding more buds instead of flopping over under their own weight. But even a perfectly fed, perfectly lit daylily will eventually stall if you skip this next part. Secret number 2. Why would a daylily that's bloomed beautifully for years suddenly go bald right in the middle? Most gardeners assume an established clump should just be left alone. Don't disturb what's working, right? Except a clump that's been thriving for years can eventually outgrow itself, with too many fans packed into the same patch of soil, all competing for the same water, nutrients, and light at ground level. The middle loses that competition first, which is exactly why it goes bald, while the outer edges keep blooming just fine. Every 3 to 5 years, or whenever you notice that center thinning out, dig up the clump and pull it apart into smaller sections, each with a few fans and their roots still attached. Slide a garden fork in around the perimeter rather than straight through the middle, lift the whole thing, and rinse the soil off with a hose so you can actually see the natural separation points between fans. From there, you can usually pull them apart by hand or use a clean, sharp knife or spade if they're packed tightly. Early spring or right after flowering are the best windows, and pick an overcast day if you can, since dividing and blazing heat stresses the plant more than it needs. Here's the part that feels wrong. When you replant those divisions, cut the foliage back hard, down to about 5 or 6 inches, and space them roughly 18 to 24 inches apart so they have room to fill in without crowding again. It looks brutal, like you're undoing all that growth, but it isn't. Less leaf means less water the roots have to support while they're reestablishing. so the plant recovers faster instead of struggling to keep oversized foliage alive on a damaged root system. Water the new divisions in deeply right after planting to settle the soil around the roots and close up any air pockets. If digging up the entire clump feels like too much, there's a smaller alternative. You can slice off just one outer section with a spade, while the rest of the clump stays undisturbed in the ground, which is far less disruptive if the whole plant is still performing well. There's no strict deadline forcing you to divide. This is a when-needed fix, not a calendar chore. As a bonus, you walk away with free plants for the rest of the garden. Within a year or two, you'll typically see that bald center fill back in and bloom again. And this next part decides whether your daylily can really survive being forgotten. Secret number 1. Before you give up on a daylily that looks completely dead, check the crown, because that's the part that actually decides whether it lives or dies. This is usually where a forgotten pot, a brutal drought, or a rough winter leaves you staring at a clump that's totally collapsed and brown, and your instinct is to call it and pull it out. That instinct makes sense. Brown and limp looks like game over. But here's what people miss. The roots can look fine or look terrible and still tell you almost nothing useful. The real answer is in the crown, that firm, pale core at the base where the roots and leaves meet. Keep in mind, dormant types die back completely every winter, no matter what you do. That's normal. While evergreen types in milder climates may hold some green through the year. What matters here is the crown itself. It stores water and energy separately from the top growth, and dormancy protects it, which is exactly why a daylily can lose everything above ground and still come roaring back. Gently brush the soil away with your fingers, not a knife, and look at it directly. If it's firm and white or cream-colored, that plant is alive. Water it and give it time. New growth is likely already on the way, sometimes showing within a few weeks under decent spring or summer conditions. While you're at it, trim away any mushy or blackened top growth so the plant isn't wasting energy trying to support dead tissue. If it's soft, dark, mushy, water-soaked, or has a foul smell, that's rot, and that tissue isn't coming back, so remove it. If you're genuinely unsure which one you're looking at, wait through one more watering cycle before deciding anything permanent. And if it's a multi-fan clump where only part of the crown has gone soft, you can often cut away the rotted section and save the fans that are still firm, using the same division approach from a moment ago. Here's the catch, though. This check only works if the earlier mistakes haven't already destroyed that crown first. A daylily planted too deep or left sitting in waterlogged soil can rot at the crown before you ever get the chance to check it, which is exactly why secret number 5 matters as much as this one. The same crown check works after a harsh winter or a rough transplant too, not just neglect. Do this right, and within a few weeks, you'll often see fresh green shoots pushing up from that crown, proof the toughest part of the plant did exactly what it's built to do. Put it all together, and it's really one connected system. The right planting depth keeps the crown healthy enough to survive almost anything. Enough sun turns leafy growth into real flowers instead of just green bulk. Backing off the nitrogen protects those blooms instead of quietly stealing them. Dividing when it's crowded keeps the whole clump vigorous instead of hollowing out from the center. And knowing how to check the crown means you'll never give up on a plant that still has life left in it. You don't need to tackle all 5 today. Look at your own daylily and figure out which one of these is actually holding it back right now. That's the one to fix first. And stacking a couple of the right corrections together usually beats chasing one flashy trick on its own. So go outside, brush back the soil at the base of your clump, and take an honest look at that crown. If you found this useful, stick around because there's plenty more of this kind of plant-specific troubleshooting coming. Tell me down in the comments which secret you're trying first, or describe exactly what your daylily looks like right now, and I'll help you figure out what's going on.